Hello and welcome to It's About Crime with me, Miss Kabo, the channel that discusses the who, what, how and why behind true crimes. Quick disclaimer that although I have studied psychology and I have a huge interest in it, I have no qualifications on the subject. All the information in these videos is from research and the professional opinions of police and psychologists. Please be aware that this video does contain disturbing content, so viewer discretion is advised. Beverley Allitt was born on the 4th of October 1968 in Corby Glen, which is a small village in the county of Lincolnshire in England. She has 3 siblings, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Her mother was a local cleaner and her father worked at an off licence when she was growing up. In school, she wasn't a good student. She failed exams to get her into the Kesteven and Grantham Girls' School and instead attended Charles Reed Secondary Modern School. She dropped out of there at the age of 16 and worked as a babysitter while she studied to be a nurse. She was seen as attention-seeking and increasingly violent as she grew older, including incidents against an ex-boyfriend who suggested that she was aggressive, deceptive and manipulative. She even accused him of rape and impregnating her. As she grew up, she became an outcast. She became fascinated with hospitals and she often feigned injury just to gain attention. While she was training as a nurse, bizarre incidents were attributed to her, including smearing the walls of a nursing home in faeces. She was frequently absent from most of her classes, claiming that she was ill, and despite this poor attendance, failing exams, she was actually still accepted on a 6-month contract as a trainee nurse at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital because they were just so understaffed at the time. This also meant that proper checks were not done. Corners were cut to get her onto the ward as they were desperately in need of another pair of hands. During February and April of 1991, over the course of just 59 days, Allitt murdered 4 children and attempted to murder another 9. Causing serious bodily harm to 6 of them. In each of these cases, the children were admitted to Ward 4 with a different ailment, but their conditions worsened dramatically after being left alone with Allitt. Her first victim was 7-week-old Liam Taylor. He had been admitted with a suspected chest infection, but within hours had had 2 respiratory incidents, suffered cardiac arrest and brain damage. He died on the 23rd of February 1991. 2 weeks later, Timothy Hardwick, who suffered from cerebral palsy, was admitted after an epileptic fit. The resuscitation team was summoned by Allitt, but they were unable to revive him despite their best efforts. Following Timothy's death, 4 more children were admitted to Ward 4 and they were left alone with Allitt, where each time their condition worsened. Kaylee Desmond, Paul Crampton, Billy Gibson and Yik Hung Chan fortunately all fully recovered after being transferred to another hospital. Allitt's next victims were 2-month-old twins Becky and Katie Phillips, who were kept in for observation due to their premature delivery. Becky was suffering from gastroenteritis, which is what brought her on to Ward 4, where Allitt took over her care. And sadly, Becky later died at home. Becky's surviving twin was then admitted into Ward 4 just as a precaution, and after being left alone with Allitt had stopped breathing. She was successfully revived multiple times, but was then transferred to another hospital. Katie survived, but was left with epilepsy and paralysed due to Allitt's actions. 4 more victims followed, finally causing suspicion to be raised at the hospital. These victims were Patrick Elston, Christopher King, Christopher Peasgood and Michael Davidson. Fortunately, none of these were fatal incidents. On the 22nd of April, 15-month-old Claire Peck was brought onto Ward 4. Claire was an asthmatic who required a breathing tube. While alone in Allitt's care for only a few minutes, she went into cardiac arrest. She was revived successfully, but when left alone again with Allitt, she suffered a second attack, which sadly she could not be recovered. The hospital finally called in the police after noting the uncommonly high number of cardiac arrests that had been happening in the children's ward. and after examining the nursing timesheets for all the deaths and the events, one name appeared every time: Beverley Allitt. Allitt was suspended from duties immediately as investigators began to examine each case. The one that stood out to them was Paul Crampton. Paul Crampton's blood was sent to a lab for examination, and they found a dangerous amount of insulin in his blood. 43,147 milliunits. That's one of the highest levels ever found in a human. Not a child, a human. Police concluded that Allitt had administered dangerous doses of insulin or potassium chloride to the victims, and many experts were asked to consult to prove beyond doubt that the deaths on Ward 4 were not from natural causes. On the 26th of July 1991, Allitt was arrested. Following the arrest, the police searched her home to find a syringe and pages which had been ripped out of the hospital allocations book at the time of Paul's admission. Once Allitt had been arrested and was being questioned by the police, they said that she wasn't nervous or intimidated. She just turned into a bold, strong woman despite her age. When she was out on bail, the police continued looking into her past, and it was then that they discovered Dorothy Lowe. She was an 80-year-old in a nursing home who had been injected with insulin in late April 1991 at Lancaster House Nursing Home while Allitt was working there. Dorothy was diabetic and she had a severe hypoglycemic attack. Allitt was seen at 3 a.m. with a syringe in her hand by a cleaner. Thankfully, Dorothy did survive, but Allitt was found not guilty of this despite there being an eyewitness. Once Allitt had been brought in for questioning regarding Dorothy, a friend, another nurse who she'd been staying with in Peterborough while on bail, mentioned to the police that strange things occurred when Allitt had been staying with her. There was a fire in her toilet, the dog had been poisoned, and her grandson had been given hypoglycemic tablets and had collapsed on a shopping trip. When Allitt was questioned about all these incidents by police, she refused to comment. Most of the time during Allitt's interview, she was completely contained. She was controlled and calm despite the fact that she was being questioned about murder. She was acting like she knew more than they did, and she was happy to correct them and to talk over them. She was trying to be the dominant person in the room. In one clip, she actually refers to one of the children as it during an interview. It just shows language that isn't soft or caring, and she's trying to psychologically distance herself from the actions that she has committed. And then there were moments where she did start to lose control and she was showing arrogance and anger at certain times. And in these moments, she was showing the real Beverley Allitt, a woman who was more concerned that she was being kept in custody than the deaths of innocent children. Police would later say that she had no empathy. Her response was basically, prove it was me. She was even given the opportunity to give an explanation, to say it was a mistake, that she had been under pressure, that it wasn't deliberate, but she never did. Once she finally sought legal counsel, the interviews changed dramatically. Her solicitors advised her to no longer respond. She would even be smiling during these interviews, and when police questioned if she found it funny, she would respond, no reply. It's clear that in the early stages of questioning, Allitt enjoyed telling people how to think. She liked to centre herself and show them how clever she is. Amazing recall, to the point where she would give too much information because she wanted to take centre stage. She wouldn't have been happy to go with the advice of no comment or no reply. But her solicitors did give her the right advice, as whenever she opens her mouth, she trips herself up. In court, Allitt's defence was the solicitor stating that she was not malicious or sadistic, she just had an illness, and suggesting that the nurse suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Now, Munchausen by proxy, or as it is now known, factitious disorder imposed on another, or FDIA for short, is a condition by which a caregiver intentionally causes health problems in another person, typically to gain attention, which is what happened in this case. Allitt received thanks from the families of her victims for all that she did to help them, as well as sympathy from staff for being in such a difficult situation. One nurse in charge was actually quoted to have said, "Poor Beverley Allitt had been there on every occasion. She has been a rock." And in a cruel twist of irony, Katie's mother, Sue Phillips, was so grateful to Allitt for saving her baby's life that she asked her to be Katie's godmother. Allitt accepted this willingly, despite being the one who had inflicted partial paralysis and sight and hearing damage to this child. When looking back at Allitt's early years, it appears she originally suffered from Munchausen syndrome, not by proxy. But when she failed to get the desired results, she switched to harming others in order to achieve her goal. Some psychologists disagree with this. Munchausen is a rare illness. Munchausen by proxy is even less common, and having gone from one to the other, it's virtually unheard of. Allitt exhibited some worrying tendencies early on while growing up. She wore bandages and casts over wounds, sometimes self-inflicted, in order to draw attention to herself, without actually allowing the injuries to be examined. Becoming overweight as an adolescent, she became increasingly attention-seeking. She often showed aggression towards others, and she spent considerable time in hospitals seeking medical attention for a string of physical ailments. She even managed to convince doctors to remove her perfectly healthy appendix. She then insisted on interfering with the surgical scar, which was prolonging the healing. She was also known to self-harm and had to resort to doctor hopping, as medical practitioners became familiar with her attention-seeking behaviours. And this clearly shows an escalation in behaviour. She started with self-harm, minor injuries, and then went on to needing a full operation, which is a huge step up from those minor injuries. And then she went to harming vulnerable people and killing them. You can see a pattern of more and more extreme behaviour to get a response, to get her to feel control and to feel cared for. There are some theories that suggest that as a child, Allitt perhaps felt insignificant amongst her 3 other siblings, and this may have resulted in her compulsive fabrications to gain attention and favour with others, including her parents. Allitt was charged with 4 counts of murder, 13 counts of attempted murder, and 13 counts of grievous bodily harm. The police claim that Allitt's behaviour when she was charged was bizarre. There was no emotion, no reaction, no comment, there was nothing, despite being charged with such serious and heinous crimes. In 1993, Allitt went to trial at Nottingham Crown Court. She was leaning out of the van, looking at the press, smiling and really enjoying the moment. But in the courtroom, away from the cameras, there was no sign of emotion shown. She was distant and she was distracted. These reactions show that she likes high drama situations and she enjoys being at the centre of things, like the crash team being called, in her interviews by police, and her story in the papers. Ultimately, Allitt was found guilty by the jury. She received 13 concurrent life sentences and ordered to serve a minimum of 30 years. After 1 week in prison, she refused to eat or drink anything, and she was transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital. After her incarceration, she admitted to what she had done, but it was partly influenced by her desire to be in hospital and be recognised as mentally ill, rather than return to prison. Because if she was innocent of the offences, there wouldn't be any reason for her to be in hospital. In December 2007, Allitt's sentence was reviewed by the High Court. Her 30-year sentence was upheld, but she is still in Rampton Hospital today. Stanley Burton, who reviewed Allitt's sentence in the High Court, said that at trial it was claimed that she did not derive pleasure from what she was doing. But evidence presented to the High Court, the psychiatric reports that had previously not been available, pointed to her actually deriving pleasure from what she was doing. An extremely harmful personality, she clearly was mentally ill, but it was rather a different illness from that which had been appreciated when she was originally sentenced, and that gave rise to a very difficult question so far as to sentencing being concerned. He went on to say, these were multiple murders and attempted murders of young children, whose lives were snuffed out almost before they had begun. The offences were a terrible breach of trust on her part, and all the victims were particularly vulnerable because of their age and of course by reason of the fact that they were in hospital under her care. By her actions, what should have been a place of safety for its patients became not just a place of danger, but if not a killing field, something close to it. As I said before, Allitt is still at Rampton Hospital, despite it being over 30 years since she was sentenced. Ultimately, taking life is an extreme action. To do it twice means you've already okayed in your mind that it was okay to do. And if you haven't been caught and you've had reward from it, then that would drive you to carry on. Allitt took advantage of vulnerable people in that role of nurse and caregiver, and her actions have devastated far too many people. I hope the victims and their families have found some kind of peace. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our future videos. Thank you again. Take care.